Ideally, we've chosen our portfolio. It's as strategically aligned. It represents the best use of the money and resources that we have to our, available to us. But we need to make sure that continues. And therefore, one of the things we need to do, this is what management control is about, but one of the solutions are regular portfolio. We look at the portfolio as a whole on a regular basis. Is it still the best use of the money and resources we have? How are we performing? Are we realising the benefits? Are we delivering on time? What have we learned? The example here is back to, do you remember Boston Consulting Group, the portfolio planning model I mentioned in the first section on the overview. 1968, the Boston Consulting Group started looking at portfolio management of conglomerates when they have different companies. And so what they're saying is, on a regular basis, you would plot on the vertical axis the market growth, how fast is the market growing, and then you'd look at your relative market share on the horizontal axis, and you would categorize your projects as dogs, question marks, or stars, or cash cows. So, and cash cows are things like, say, the Mars bar, something you're going to get, you generate return on it year after year. You don't have to invest much in advertising. The dogs, low growth market, you've got a low market share. Why would you be in it? And the idea is what you should do is you should kill the dogs, just get rid of them. So in a conglomerate, they would sell those companies. So you kill the, well actually, I've got to be careful about this. Forgive me for the language, you don't want to kill the dogs, you want to drown the puppies. In other words, you want to kill them early before they grow up. We don't want to be spending enormous sums of money on some of these projects. Get out early. So the dogs should be killed, the question marks should be turned, either got rid of or turn them into stars, and the stars should be turned into cash cows. And so the idea is that you have this cyclical process of looking at your portfolio as a whole. This will be looking at companies. So it's a company that owns other companies, but the same applies for our portfolio. You put your projects there, which ones really should be, either because they haven't delivered or because things have changed. And that's the fundamental point, actually. If you live in a stable environment where nothing changes, where strategic objectives don't change, where business priorities don't change, where funding doesn't change, and your projects get delivered on time to budget and deliver the benefits, then everything is fine. The trouble is, most organisations don't operate in those circumstances. Things change. If things change, then we have to be able to reallocate the funding, which means sometimes we've got to be able to stop projects. How many projects? I don't know, but it's got to be more than zero. More than zero. It has to be if we live in a kind of dynamic world. But that makes it even more important that when we do reallocate money, we do it early. We don't keep throwing good money after bad. So regular portfolio reviews is one way. Another way is to make sure we have a consistent business change life cycle, or project life cycle, or product life cycle. This is just a model here from criminal justice where we mapped the various stages at the top. Just one there. Develop the business, or the OGC gateway processes here with the OGC gateway reviews, and we map this into our business case, concept case, strategic outline case, the outline case, and the full business case. And what we used to do was we said the portfolio isn't here. If an organisation has identified a great idea, we expect that organisation to fund the concept case, although occasions we might seed fund it, but normally it would be the organisation themselves. If you want funding, initial approval would come when we had a strategic outline case. Full approval would come when we had a full business case, but then we had this Gateway X continuing review every 6 months. All projects and programs were under review, both using stage gates, which I'm going to come on to, and at the portfolio level review. So regular stage or phase gates, looking at the project again and again and again through the life cycle. Regularly, minimum every 6 months. Is it still the right thing to do? How are we performing? How could we perform? If we are going to continue, how do we ensure delivery? How do we ensure benefits realisation? Emphasising this point, again, it's an active process. Crucially, linked to, this is Bob Cooper, staged release of funding. In other words, if you go to the gateway, each gateway should have defined criteria. We don't just kind of turn up and think, well, now what are we going to look at? The criteria about what's required at each gateway, there are prescribed decision criteria. How do we decide? Because every gateway should result in a go, kill or hold decision. Yeah, there. Go, kill or hold. In other words, put it on hold, continue or stop. But there should be very clear criteria associated with each of those decisions. And so you should get funding that goes through to the next gateway. We don't just allocate money to projects for the entire life cycle of the project. You get money, the money's allocated for each gate, from one gate to the next. Here's the money, gets you to the next gateway. By the next gateway, we expect you to have delivered A, B, C, and D. At the next gateway, did you deliver A, B, C, and D? Did you deliver more? Did you deliver less? Why? How can we resolve the issue? So what's called stage release of funding. The importance of stage release of funding is this idea that we have, back to that McKinsey research, we've got to better reallocate money where the portfolio priorities have shifted. Stage release of funding gives us greater capacity, greater flexibility, greater agility in our portfolio funding to move and redeploy money. Doesn't mean we just cancel projects for the sake of it. If you're cancelling too many projects, that's a failure, just as not cancelling projects is a failure. I mean, I have to say my personal experience is, and I remember talking to a chief exec who said to me, Steve, every time we've cancelled a project, it's been obvious in hindsight we should have cancelled it earlier. Too often we don't make the decision. We put off making the decision for too long. We've got to be a little bit more, if you look at oil exploration companies, pharmaceuticals, they're very good. They know they live in a world of huge uncertainty, so they're very disciplined about getting out. Oil companies, they don't keep drilling. And say, well, if we drill for another week, we might find oil. If we drill for, no, you've got a week or whatever it is. If you don't deliver in the week, then we stop drilling and we go somewhere else. Research, evidence-based, but then they're out. Get out quickly. The other point about this is in management control, this idea of checklists or scorecards. Bob Cooper again argues for scorecards. In other words, we don't want big business cases, huge business cases. I said on my courses, Jenner's Law, the bigger the business case, the worse the business case. Because what are they trying to hide? You can hide an enormous amount of information if you've got a big business case. What we need to do is define the information we expect to see, those fast and frugal decision criteria. So this is just an example. Remember, attractiveness, achievability, affordability. Attractiveness, what did we look at? Well, in this portfolio, we looked at the economic analysis. In other words, what's the I mentioned net present value, the internal rate of return, and the payback. Why not look at all three? Why did you have to choose? So we looked at all three. We looked at whether the benefits had been signed off by recipients, whether they'd been agreed, whether they were recorded in departmental targets and so forth, efficiency plans. We looked at the scale of strategic alignment, and you might say to me, Steve, you said earlier, strategic alignment doesn't matter, what matters is strategic contribution. Absolutely, but we also asked people here, the SRO and the strategic planners, to make an assessment about how important each project and programme was to each strategic objective. So it was a way of getting, looking at things from more, say Bob Cooper, look at things from more than use multi-criteria, criteria in combination. And there was just another model we had down here, but that was a kind of a model we'd purchased. But so looking at the scale of benefits, looking at the financial benefits, looking at whether benefits have been agreed. That was our attractive one page. See, one page looking at attractiveness on a project or a program. One page looking at the achievability. So we looked about here. There's some factors here we looked at. But we also ranked the degree of business change. What's the scale of business change required? Remember that transport model I showed you? Scale of business change, scale of behavioural change. We asked to look at the contingencies. What was the scale of, was there enough contingency? What was the level of optimism bias? Mitigation of optimism bias is reasonable. Yes, no, or maybe. And we had that SRO assessment that I showed you earlier about their confidence of delivery. So a way of combining different perspectives into a view on attractiveness, achievability, and one for affordability. Looking at the the project costs, the impact in terms of CapEx, the impact in terms of OpEx. But also one thing I wanted to highlight at the bottom here with the star, which I'd forgotten about, but it talked there about recycling of cost savings. In other words, if you've got projects, so we've got a bucket load of money for our portfolio, and I've chosen to invest in projects A, B and C, and project A delivers cost savings, why don't those cost savings come back into the portfolio to fund projects D, E and F? And the idea there was that what we were trying to do was start off by, well, we've got some money in the portfolio, we haven't got enough, so let's invest in year one to get some cost savings so we can recycle those cost savings to fund some of the strategic contribution initiatives we want to fund from. So look at there, who gets to keep the money that we've saved? So is there any scope for recycling the cost savings that will be realised? It's another incentive then they have to deliver, because otherwise we say to people, we'd love to invest in this project, but this other project didn't deliver the cost savings that were required to invest in it. And so people then understand, if we don't deliver, this has impacts downstream. These are dependencies across the portfolio and beyond the portfolio. Also, in terms of this management control, so we've got management control, we've got checklists, we've got business change cycle, we've got portfolio reviews, we've got gateway reviews, yeah? Ways of looking, re-examining, is it still the right thing to do? We've got the portfolio dashboard report. So on a monthly basis, a view of performance. This is from the P3O online repository. Just an example of a dashboard report. Each organisation has to design their own dashboard report, but it's a way of monitoring progress against your delivery plan. It's one example. But I just highlight here, this is an example that we had where rather than trying to combine everything, we said, look, we'll have a dashboard on the schedule, a dashboard on the financial side, the spend against budget, a benefits dashboard, and a progress against key milestones. Using these techniques, management by exception. In other words, if you have control limits, let's say it's up to 10%. Up to 10%, the project manages the variance. From 10 to 20%, the program manages the variance. Above 20%, it gets reported to the portfolio, or whatever wherever the limits are set. So it's this principle of management by exception. We only report to the portfolio variances that exceed the control limit. One version of the truth, OVOTT, one version of the truth. Got to have a clear set of rules and frameworks about reporting. Where does the data come from? How is it consolidated, and when is it consolidated? Otherwise, you end up on project boards or portfolio boards, and you say this is the financial spend, and suddenly someone says, no, the numbers have changed, and here's the updated report, and no one's quite sure what the latest position is. There has to be, we collect the data on the last Friday in the month, the information has to be supplied by 2 o'clock, it comes from person X, delivered to person Y, they combine it. So this idea of one version of the truth. And clear line of sight, back to this idea that whatever you produce should give us meaningful information. Otherwise, why produce it? And there's an important point there. First of all, that if you haven't got the data, leave it blank, but still include it in the report. In other words, the section in the report should still be there. And I've got a brilliant example. Well, I'll mention it now. I'll show you an example later on from Dubai Customs. And they had a benefits quadrant, 4 types of benefits. One of those benefits was customer satisfaction, and they had no data on customer satisfaction. But their reports on benefits realisation still included that section. So everyone knew we've got a gap. Otherwise, what happens is it gets taken out of the report, and everyone thinks they look at what's on the paper and they forget we haven't done the work on customer satisfaction that they need to do. So it was a way, very cleverly, that Dubai Customs kept a focus on they needed to improve. There was another area they needed to collect data on. So if you haven't got the data, so what? If it's important, leave that report there, leave it blank. It's a reminder that we need to close the gap. Oh yes, and this star on the lower right-hand side there. This was to highlight something here. This is progress against key milestones. You'll notice there are 3 columns. The columns were the actual date, also the target date and the actual date. So normally you would just have two columns: the target date for the milestone and the actual date. We actually had a 3rd column, which was the original target date, because what you'll find over time is things change. People come back, the project is rescoped, the target, someone misses a target, So they agreed a new target date, and then everyone says, look, we're green, 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 green. Well, only because you changed all the dates. So what we tried to do there was keep a focus on what was the original target date, as well as what's the updated target date, and then the actual.